I now look to Minal Haq, Christchurch ex-standing committee, to open the case for the opposition.
Retributive justice, in its current or most extreme forms, is undeniably untenable. Think of the most extreme cases of retribution, and the proposition's arguments seem almost convincing, if not unrefutable. But for many of us, retribution is something far simpler, far more principled, and far more definitively a cornerstone of our morality. It isn't so much the caricature of an eye for an eye, than the belief that good deeds come to those who do good, and justice must be served to those who cross the lines of justice. It is therefore no way obsolete in the normative sense, which is one way of understanding the notion of obsolescence. It acts as a reminder that we are more than just a grim, deterministic bundle of cells. Rather, we are morally free agents who can and should be held responsible for our actions. I am not here to defend the misapplication of justice or broken legal systems. Neither reality make any claim about the obsolescence of retributive justice, nor can it be definitively argued that these flaws in the status quo are the result of a system inclusive of retributive justice, rather than actually unfortunate consequences of larger socioeconomic realities. Even if you dislike retributive justice, recall the fact that to say something is obsolete is to also make an empirical claim that retributive justice is no longer prevalent or commonly visible in our society today, and this is clearly false. Retributive justice is deeply entrenched in our religious beliefs, in our political landscape, and in our social web of complex expectations. It has been, is, and will remain important in our understanding of discipline and punishment, the right and the wrong. I have two theses today. Firstly, retributive justice is normatively not obsolete. Secondly, retributive justice is empirically not obsolete. Before I delve further into my argument, it falls upon me to introduce the speakers of the proposition. You have just heard from Sarah Dubé, who I'd like to thank for such an eloquent opening to the debate. Sarah is a second-year PPE student at St. Hugh's College and a current member of the Standing Committee. I've had the pleasure of getting to know Sarah much better this term, and I wasn't surprised when I learnt what side of the debate she was speaking on. Sarah is a very hard-working, extremely moral, and conscientious student. Sarah is also very vegan. One meal, I asked her if she had ever eaten meat. Looking very suspicious, Sarah remained silent. Later in the evening, she admitted she once ate a prawn cracker, unaware of the prawn. It is quite understandable Sarah is so keen to avoid punishment. Our first guest speaker is Francis Cook, Chief Executive of the Howard League for Penal Reform, the oldest penal reform charity in the United Kingdom. Our second guest speaker is Ard van der Steur, a Dutch lawyer and former politician. He was the Dutch Minister of Security and Justice between 2015 and 2017. Mr. President, these are your speakers, and they are most welcome. I want to start my first thesis today with an almost counterintuitive argument. I argue that retributive justice is the only reason why we do not systematically overpunish everyone in our society. We have three primary objectives in criminal justice other than retribution: rehabilitation, protection, and deterrence. Consider protection. If we want to ensure that a heinous criminal never makes an impact upon society again, we could simply ensure that they are locked up in prison for life, or barred any forms of integration support, even when their long sentences expire. Consider deterrence. If you want to deter someone from parking a car on the wrong side of Cornmarket Street, just outside the Union, you could simply threaten to lock them up for 5 months, and the severe yet disproportionate cost there would be an effective deterrent. There is nothing humane about the objectives of protection or deterrence. It's all cold, bitter utilitarianism. Where retributive justice enters the debate is quite simple. It tells us that we should only punish people if and only if they deserve their punishment. It reminds us that we cannot instrumentalize locking someone up for a disproportionate amount of time as a scapegoat and tool for achieving grander social objectives. I quote Kant here, who argues in his Metaphysics of Morals that judicial punishment can never be used merely as a means to promote some other good for the criminal himself or for civil society, but instead, it must in all cases be imposed on him only on the grounds that he has committed a crime. This is because human beings, you and I, are not tools. We deserve better than disproportionate punishments. Everyone deserves a fair trial. It is the notion of desert underpinning retribution that stands as a core defense against the state doing to us whatever it likes for the sake of expediency. Let's try and take a look at it through the eyes of the victims of the crimes. No doubt, some want to forgive and forget. Most just want to move on with their lives. This does not mean that we should invalidate the legitimate and intimate feelings shared by many victims of some of the worst crimes in history, from murder to rape, from grievous bodily harm to the destruction of financial assets and wealth. No doubt, there is an argument for rehabilitation, but this isn't enough. We can provide counseling and anger management and teach criminals to function in society. But let's take the example of a pedophile. This is not an extreme example. This is an everyday reality, with 1 in 20 children in Britain being subject to such abuse. In a classroom of 20, that is 1 child. The children against whom this act is committed will never get their innocence back. The crime cannot be undone. We can hope that with the right counseling, if they are lucky enough to receive it, they can move forward from the trauma. Maybe they can have functioning relationships. Maybe they don't live their lives constantly haunted or looking over their shoulders. Currently, occasionally alongside other punishment, child sex offenders are placed on a register and some of their liberties are curtailed. For example, a convicted pedophile cannot be a teacher. Is this too much of a punishment? Do the children, their families, their friends not deserve justice? Where do we draw the line? Rehabilitation alone is no justice. If you have to look your attacker in the eyes because they're back and living in your area and have promised never to do it again, is that fair? Is that morality? This is not to say that anything goes and we should accept brutality against prisoners. Recall the earlier discussion that we had about the fact retribution acts as a constraint upon state actions, and that, if anything, we minimize gratuitous punishment. I raise a further argument in support of retributivism, a claim of systematic buy-in and support of the criminal justice system. Reporting a crime is often highly difficult, burdensome, and emotionally draining. There is nothing rational about telling the police about a crime you have witnessed or suspect has happened. You don't get paid, and if anything, you often get dismissed or shamed. I recently read an article commenting on the rise of the Me Too movement. After decades, women are garnering the courage to speak up against the mistreatment in both recent and old incidents, posting their experiences online using the hashtag #MeToo, trying to illustrate how widespread the problem of sexual assault is. The article was written by a boy, outlining just how stressful it was to be a man today because of all the allegations flying around. Now, I loved being a girl. I went to an all-girls school and I had a wonderful time. I actually thought the term feminist was unnecessary because the thought that someone would view men and women as unequal was impossible for me to imagine. Having left school quite some time ago now, I would never ridicule the stress this young man feels. No one wants to be falsely accused of a crime they didn't commit. But as a woman, actually as a person, I'm confident in saying the stresses endured by this young man do not compare even an iota to the stresses endured by the victims of such crimes. Regardless of gender, in the UK, only 1 in every 14 rape allegations ends in a conviction. Retributivism at least gives us the sense of purpose, the belief that our engagement with the criminal justice system has value, and the hope that someday every word we pass on to the courts and the police will make a difference in stopping another murder or rape or attack. Retributive justice empowers witnesses and would-be bystanders to care about social injustices, to report to assist with the investigation of crimes. Proportionality, victims, and buy-ins. These are the reasons why we need retributive justice, especially today, in an age where terrorism is rampant, hate speech is proliferate, and when crimes threatening to destroy our social fabric are on the rise. I now turn to my second thesis. Even if retributive justice is morally wrong, and you ignore everything I've just said, it's still practically everywhere, and is certainly not empirically obsolete. Buddhism, often termed as the most peaceful of all religions, presents to us the idea of karma. Hinduism also describes karma as the universal principle of cause and effect. Our actions, both good and bad, come back to us in the future. This is retribution. An eye for an eye is found in the Torah, Bible, and Quran. In Judaism, it was humanized by the rabbis, who interpreted this saying to mean reasonable pecuniary action. Jesus on the Mount supposedly adds to this, reminding his followers that in the moment when someone slaps them, they can also turn their cheek, promoting procedure over personal vengeance. The Quran brings these two together as it reads, "In the Torah, we prescribe for them a life for a life, an eye for an eye, a nose for a nose, an ear for an ear, a tooth for a tooth, an equal wound for an equal wound. If anyone forgoes this out of charity, it will serve as atonement for his bad deeds." In essence, you can overlook a crime, you do have the option to forgive, but morally, socially, fundamentally, we are entitled to justice. All these teachings are merely guidelines, but together they constitute the beliefs of 5,885,400,000 people. It simply cannot be denied that these ideas are entrenched in our legal systems, no doubt being developed over time, but have woven their way into our sense of morality, societal conduct, and our Constitution. Recently, the Pope overturned the death penalty as part of the teachings of the Catholic Church. This was widely reported and highly controversial. But he didn't overturn life imprisonment. He didn't overturn repenting for one's sins. Is this not retribution? This debate is about legal practice, not about personal brutality and taking matters into one's own hands. Retributive justice is all about finding the right balance. It doesn't take away a fair trial, it promotes it. Politically, just take a look at President Trump's America. The United States is the world's third or fourth largest country by total area. The new administration is so pro the notion of retributive justice, they are calling for more extreme punishment for offenses such as drug dealing. How, by any measure, can retributive justice in today's world be deemed obsolete? It isn't just extreme punishment. It is time or punishment proportionate to the offense. As I'm sure President Trump would agree, if you can't do the time, don't do the crime. Ladies and gentlemen, I conclude tonight's debate with a reminder of what this motion actually means. The proposition is right to say that some of the worst forms of retributive justice are wrong and that we should change them. Yes, we should, but we cannot logically bring ourselves to say that we must deal with a problem unless this problem exists in such a way that commands urgency in our response. An obsolete problem is of no concern. For the proposition to make intelligible sense tonight, they must at least concede that retribution is not obsolete, at least not in the empirical sense. An eye for an eye does not make the whole world blind. It makes us see each other for whom we truly are, individuals who should be and must be held to account for our actions. For it is precisely such optimism, such humanism, that makes us more than merely cogs in the machine. For this, side with the opposition.